There is a specific kind of stillness that settles in when you look at a phone screen. It's not that you don't have anything to say. It's not that you don't miss the person on the other end. In fact, you might be thinking about them intensely. You might have seen a meme that made you laugh or had a thought you wanted to share. But then, an invisible barrier rises up. A friction that feels physical stops your thumb from tapping the screen. You wait. You put the phone down. You tell yourself you'll do it later, or perhaps you secretly hope they will reach out first so you don't have to. And when they do, the relief is immediate. You are warm, you are responsive, you are funny, you are fully present. But the act of starting it, the act of breaking the silence yourself, feels like walking through a wall of water. From the outside, this silence looks like indifference. Friends might joke that you are terrible at keeping in touch. Partners might accuse you of being distant or passive, interpreting your lack of initiation as a lack of care. They assume you are sitting there, weighing your options, perhaps playing a power game, or simply deciding that you are too important to make the first move. They see the behavior and label it as aloof or lazy. But that is rarely what is happening on the inside. Internally, this doesn't feel like power, and it certainly doesn't feel like indifference. It often feels like a subtle, paralyzing weight. It is a state of suspended animation where the desire to connect is battling a deeply rooted resistance to being the one who asks for it. We rarely talk about the psychology of the person who never texts first with any real nuance. We tend to frame it as a bad social habit that needs to be broken. But if we look closer, this resistance to initiation is often a complex psychological signature. It is a protective mechanism that has likely been running in the background of your operating system for a long time. There is more going on here than just being bad at communication. To understand this, we have to look at how the brain processes social reward and social threat. For many people, the act of reaching out initiates a specific type of vulnerability. When you send a text, you open a loop. You put a bid for connection out into the void, and until that person replies, that loop remains open. For a neurotypical brain with secure attachment, this open loop is just a pause. It is neutral territory. But for a brain that is highly attuned to rejection, even perceived microscopic rejection, that open loop registers as a threat. Neuroscience tells us that social rejection lights up the same areas of the brain as physical pain. For the non-initiator, the silence between the sent message and the received reply is not empty space. It is filled with the potential for pain. Your brain is likely running a rapid cost-benefit analysis that you aren't even consciously aware of. It calculates the risk of an unanswered text not just as an annoyance, but as a confirmation of unworthiness. By not texting first, you are effectively controlling the environment. You are eliminating the variable of rejection. If you don't ask, you can't be denied. If you don't reach out, you can't be left on red. This wiring rarely starts in adulthood. It often traces back to early developmental environments. Consider what your experience was with expressing needs as a child. In some households, children are taught that their needs are only valid when they are invited to express them. If you grew up in an environment where your unprompted noise, requests, or presence were met with dismissal or irritation, you likely learned a very powerful survival strategy: wait to be noticed. You may have learned that your autonomy was less safe than your compliance. You learned to become a, quote, responder. A responder is someone who is excellent at adapting to the emotional climate created by others, but finds it terrifying to set the temperature themselves. By waiting for the other person to signal interest first, you are gathering evidence that you are safe to proceed. You are waiting for the green light because at some point in your history, running the red light of social interaction carried a heavy cost. There is also a component here related to how we perceive our own presence. Many people who struggle to initiate carry a subconscious belief that they are inherently intrusive. You might feel that by texting first, you are bothering someone. You imagine them busy, stressed, or occupied, and you imagine your message appearing as a demand on their time. This is often called the burden of presence. You have internalized the idea that your connection is a tax on others rather than a gift, so you wait for them to bill you rather than offering to pay. It is important to say this clearly. Being a responder rather than an initiator is not a moral failing. It is not a character flaw. The world is an ecosystem that requires different types of social wiring. Initiators are the engine of social connection, pushing things forward, but responders are often the anchor. Responders tend to be excellent listeners, deeply observant, and incredibly loyal once the connection is established. This is not about fixing a broken part of you. It is about understanding that your social battery is wired to run on a different current, one that requires safety before it can generate power. However, there is a paradox here that is worth examining because it comes with a quiet cost. By always waiting for others to initiate, you are essentially outsourcing your sense of belonging. You are giving other people the sole power to decide when your relationships exist. When you never initiate, you never get to feel the specific validation of being the one who chose. You are always the chosen, never the chooser. This can lead to a subtle, lingering loneliness, not because you are alone, but because you lack the agency of your own social life. You might find yourself surrounded by people who chose you, while you quietly wonder if you would have chosen them. Furthermore, this dynamic can create a self-fulfilling prophecy. The people who love you may eventually stop reaching out, not because they don't care, but because they feel their effort is one-sided. They might interpret your safety mechanism as a lack of interest, and in an effort to respect your space, they create the very distance you are trying to avoid. If you recognize yourself in this description, know that your silence is not an absence of love. It is often a surplus of care, a care so heavy and terrified of being misplaced that you freeze. You are not cold. You are cautious. You are waiting for the evidence that you are wanted. There is a shift that happens when you realize that your presence is not a burden, but a contribution. You don't have to become a social butterfly or change your entire personality, but understanding that your fear of intrusion is a lie your brain tells you to keep you safe can be the beginning of a different kind of freedom. Recognizing this pattern is the first step in deciding if it still serves you. If you are curious about why feeling like a burden became your default setting and how to gently lay that burden down, that is a thread we can pull at a little more next time.